In a little town called Agbo, there lived a very young boy named Emmanuel. Emmanuel came from a very poor home, and because of this, he was always bullied and beaten up by other students at his school. They knew he was very poor and had no one to defend or fight for him. Emmanuel always wore torn and tattered school uniforms because his father couldn't afford to buy him a new pair. "Tattered Emmanuel, tattered Emmanuel, tattered Emmanuel," they would chant loudly. Emmanuel would run to the back of his classroom and cry his eyes out. After crying, he would wipe his tears and smile like nothing happened. He often wished his parents were also rich and felt that life was very unfair to him. Emmanuel was always sad and hurt. Emmanuel's father, Mr. Titus, was a very hard-working and determined mechanic. He was well known for his honesty and good skills, and everyone in Agbo always went to him whenever they needed their cars fixed. Emmanuel's mother, Mrs. Titus, was also supportive. She often washed people's clothes to raise money and support her husband in his business and at home. Mr. Titus knew the importance of education, so he worked day and night to ensure Emmanuel went to the best school in Agbo. He wanted his son to have the best education he deserved. Emmanuel attended Royal Primary School and was the best student in his class. He represented the school in many competitions and always won, making his parents very proud. However, while some people admired Emmanuel's intelligence, some of his peers disliked and envied him. In Emmanuel's class, there were two boys named Sam and Ooni. They were from wealthy homes but were unserious in school. They didn't read their books and only played and caused trouble. They considered themselves kings because of their wealthy parents, and anyone from a poor home was seen as a slave. The teachers always compared them to Emmanuel whenever they failed their tests or exams. "Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? Despite your parents' wealth, a poor boy like Emmanuel does better than you in his studies," the teachers would say, ridiculing them. This only made them hate and despise Emmanuel more, exposing him to more bullying and hate from his fellow students. Despite being bullied, Emmanuel refused to tell his parents about it. He kept it to himself because he didn't want to make them feel bad. He saw them hustling and suffering day and night to put food on the table and felt pity for his parents. When Emmanuel was promoted to Primary 6, he represented his school in an international competition and, as usual, came first. The organizers of the competition were so amazed by Emmanuel's performance that they nominated him to write a scholarship exam. If he passed, he would be granted a scholarship until university. This made Emmanuel and his parents very happy. Sam and Ooni, however, were very angry and jealous of Emmanuel. They started plotting against him to ensure he didn't write or pass the exams. Emmanuel had a best friend named Augustine. They had been friends since childhood and did almost everything together. Augustine's family was average, so Sam and Ooni did not bully him like they did Emmanuel. Emmanuel trusted Augustine a lot and told him everything about himself. A few days before the scholarship exam, on a very cold afternoon at school, it had just finished raining heavily, and it was time for recess. All the students left the classroom except Emmanuel, who stayed behind because he was worried that Sam and Ooni would bully him as always. He sat in the class, reading his books to prepare for the upcoming scholarship exams. Augustine understood why Emmanuel didn't want to go out, so he went out to buy snacks for both of them. As Augustine was returning with the snacks, Sam and Ooni stood in his way and started interrogating him. "Where is Emmanuel, your poor and wretched friend?" they asked. "He's in the classroom," Augustine replied fearfully. Sam and Ooni were very influential, and Augustine knew he couldn't challenge them. He was afraid. Sam and Ooni instructed Augustine to lead Emmanuel to a very lonely path that led to the village river after school. However, Augustine refused bluntly. He knew they were mischievous and worried about what they planned to do to Emmanuel. Sam and Ooni dragged Augustine to an empty class and started beating him for refusing to do as they instructed. When the pain became too much, Augustine pleaded with them to let him go and promised to do as they asked. When Augustine got to the classroom, Emmanuel saw the bruises on his face and asked what happened. Augustine lied that he stumbled and fell while getting the snacks, convincing Emmanuel to follow him to the riverside after school to wash his body and remove the bloodstains before going home. Emmanuel believed his best friend and followed him through the lonely bush path, which was very slippery and drenched from the rain. When they arrived at the riverside, Emmanuel was shocked to see Sam and Ooni emerge from the bush where they had been waiting. They confronted Emmanuel and Augustine. Sam struck Augustine on the head with a big stone, and he fainted. Then they beat Emmanuel and threw him into the river, hoping he would die and be carried away. They ran back to the village, pretending nothing had happened, leaving Augustine lying unconscious by the river. Emmanuel didn't know how to swim, so he struggled to stay afloat. He was almost drowning when he found a big tree branch and held onto it. He started screaming for help, but the path was deserted, and no one was nearby to help. Augustine was still unconscious, so Emmanuel was helpless. He screamed and cried for help until the river carried him away. A few hours later, Augustine regained consciousness. He looked for Emmanuel but couldn't find him because the river had already washed him away. When Augustine got home, it was already late. He was shocked to see Mr. Titus and Mrs. Titus, Emmanuel's parents, at his house. They were looking for their son. Immediately they saw Augustine. They rushed to him and asked if he had seen Emmanuel. They believed Emmanuel was with Augustine because he hadn't come home yet. Augustine, fearing for his life, lied that he hadn't seen Emmanuel since school ended. "I haven't seen Emmanuel since the end of school today. He left very early, so we couldn't walk home together," Augustine said. Emmanuel's parents were heartbroken at his words. It was getting dark, so they headed to the school to look for Emmanuel. They searched everywhere but couldn't find him. They went back home feeling very disappointed and hurt. Meanwhile, the river carried Emmanuel to a neighboring village called Obudu. He was floating helplessly, holding the branch, when a fisherman saw and rescued him. The fisherman rushed Emmanuel to the hospital where he was admitted. The next day, when Emmanuel woke up, the fisherman asked how he ended up in the river. Emmanuel narrated everything that had happened. Out of anger and pity, the fisherman talked to his friend, a policeman, and together they all went back to Agbo village. Back in Agbo village, Emmanuel's parents were devastated. They had searched the whole village for their son but couldn't find him. Sam and Ooni had sternly warned Augustine and threatened to throw him into the river if he told anyone about what happened. So Augustine kept quiet out of fear. When the fisherman, Emmanuel, and the police arrived at Emmanuel's compound, his parents were overjoyed to see him. They hugged him passionately and wept, thinking he was already dead. The policemen arrested Sam and Ooni for attempted murder and took them to Obudu village. However, Sam and Ooni's parents were very influential and called the head of the police station, pleading for their release. The boys were released within 24 hours because they were considered too young for prison and returned to school. Emmanuel focused on his education and the upcoming scholarship exam, avoiding Sam and Ooni. The two boys also kept their distance because their parents warned them to stop bullying Emmanuel. Some days later, Emmanuel wrote the scholarship exam and passed brilliantly. He was given a scholarship to study at one of the best schools in the city. When Emmanuel arrived at the new school, he was shocked to find Sam and Ooni there too. The school was for wealthy children, so it was normal for Sam and Ooni to be admitted. Sam and Ooni continued bullying Emmanuel at the new school. They would mistreat him and send him on errands, often ridiculing and mocking him in front of other students. They told everyone how poor his parents were and made life miserable for him. This greatly affected Emmanuel's academic performance. When his teachers began to ask him what the matter was, Emmanuel explained the situation to them, and they decided to transfer him to another reputable school. Emmanuel was eventually transferred to another school where he was able to focus on his studies without interruptions. After completing secondary school, he gained a scholarship to a prestigious university in London and studied medicine. A few years later, Emmanuel graduated and became a well-known and skilled surgeon, highly sought after for his expertise. He didn't forget his parents. Emmanuel opened a very big supermarket for them and placed them on a monthly allowance. Everyone in Agbo village respected them because they were the first surgeon in the village. They became very wealthy and prominent in their village. Meanwhile, Sam and Ooni couldn't gain admission to any university. They didn't take their studies seriously because their parents were wealthy, and they continued wasting their parents' money even as they grew older. One day, Sam and Ooni were on their way home after wasting their parents' money at the club when they had a very serious car accident. They were quickly rushed to the hospital for immediate treatment. Fortunately, they were taken to the hospital where Emmanuel worked. All the other surgeons had retired for the day, and the only surgeon available was Emmanuel. When Emmanuel entered the ward, he was shocked to discover that the patients were Sam and Ooni, the same boys who made life a living hell for him. He told the nurses on duty that he wouldn't be able to help them. He narrated to them how Sam and Ooni made his life miserable when he was in school. The nurses went on their knees and pleaded with him to help them, advising him not to repay evil with evil. After pleading with him for a while, Emmanuel agreed to operate on them. After a successful surgery, Sam and Ooni recovered quickly. They were equally surprised to learn that Emmanuel was the surgeon who saved their lives. They went on their knees and pleaded with Emmanuel to forgive them for all the wrongs they did to him in the past. Emmanuel forgave them. Sam and Ooni decided to change their ways. They stopped being wayward and started doing good because of Emmanuel. They believed God gave them a second chance through Emmanuel. They even built a big hospital in Agbo village for the villagers and devoted the rest of their lives to helping the less privileged. The moral lesson of this story teaches us to understand that it is important to treat people kindly, no matter their background, because we do not know if they will be the ones to help us tomorrow. Teachers should avoid comparing children to avoid exposing a child unknowingly to more bullying because they may not be there to save them when they are being bullied. Thank you for watching, and do not forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts. Together, let's spread the magic of storytelling and celebrate the beauty of our shared humanity.